You've been sold a lie your entire life, and the worst part is, you probably don't even realize it yet, because everything you were told about work, money, security, and success was designed to keep you running on a wheel that was never built for your benefit. Today we're going to rip that apart completely and show you what escaping the rat race actually looks like when real people do it, not influencers selling you a course, not millionaires telling you to just invest in stocks, but actual human beings who walked away from decades of corporate life and lived to tell the truth about what happened next. So let me ask you something uncomfortable. When was the last time you woke up on a Monday morning and felt genuinely excited about your day? Not just okay with it, not just tolerating it, but actually excited. If you're struggling to remember, or if that feeling seems so distant it might as well belong to a different person, then this video is for you. Because what we're going to talk about today isn't just about quitting your job. It's about understanding why the system was never built to set you free. What actually happens inside your mind and body when you finally step off the wheel, and the practical truth about money that nobody in school or the office ever taught you. Let's start with the trap itself, because most people don't even recognize they're in one. The rat race isn't just a metaphor for having a job you don't love. It's a deeply engineered cycle. You go to school, you get a job, you earn money. You spend that money on things that feel like rewards for all the stress you just endured, and then you need more money to cover those expenses, so you keep working. Every raise gets consumed by a lifestyle upgrade. Every windfall disappears into a new debt. And here's the part that should genuinely disturb you. Research shows that nearly 8 in 10 workers are living paycheck to paycheck. But even more shocking is that among people earning well over $100,000 a year, a significant chunk of them are still flat broke at the end of every month. So it's not just about earning more. The cycle itself is the problem. And here's why. From the moment we were children, we were conditioned to see money not as a tool for building freedom, but as fuel for consumption. Advertisers built entire empires on that conditioning. Credit cards made it frictionless. Social media turned it into a competition. We started measuring our worth by what we could display: the car, the holiday, the lifestyle that looks good online. And the entire economy actually depends on you staying locked in that cycle. Think about that for a moment. The system works best when you keep consuming, when you keep needing the paycheck to fund the lifestyle that makes the paycheck feel worth it. Now here's where it gets deeply personal, and I want you to stay with me here because this is the part nobody talks about. There are real people who reached a breaking point, who stepped off that wheel, and what they experienced on the other side was nothing like what they feared. Take someone who quit a well-paid career at 53 years old, with only around £20,000 saved, no pension lined up, no grand master plan. Just a growing awareness that something was deeply wrong. Not with the job exactly, but with what the job was doing to him as a human being. High blood pressure, high cholesterol, and then a letter from the doctor saying he was pre-diabetic. Stopping at fast food restaurants twice a week, drinking a bottle of wine every night just to decompress. Barely sleeping because his brain wouldn't switch off. He wasn't lazy. He was somebody who had worked hard for decades, climbed the ladder, earned the bonuses, had the company car. But somewhere along the way, the job stopped being something he did and started being everything he was. And that is the most dangerous part of the rat race that nobody warns you about. It becomes your identity. When you spend 15, 20, 30 years being defined by your professional title, your salary, your status, the thought of leaving doesn't just feel financially risky. It feels like you'd be destroying yourself. But what if the opposite is true? What if staying is actually the thing that's destroying you? He quit. Called his boss one morning and handed his notice in. His colleagues thought he'd lost his mind. They told him to take it back, but he didn't. And a year later, here's what had actually happened. His blood sugar had come back down to normal levels. He was no longer pre-diabetic. He was sleeping properly for the first time in years. He was walking 5 miles every morning along the river, lifting weights 3 times a week, fasting in a way that worked for his body, and finding genuine joy in something as simple as buying an old item at a car boot sale for £5 and selling it for 40. Not because he was getting rich. He wasn't. He'd worked out that he needed about £1,000 a month to cover his actual essential costs, and that was achievable through reselling, through learning new skills, through getting creative with what he already had around him. Old collectibles he'd been carrying from house to house for decades, vintage electronics, secondhand finds, and every single sale gave him a dopamine hit that years of guaranteed monthly paychecks never did, because he'd earned it himself, on his own terms. Now contrast that with what someone else discovered when they retired at 64. And I want you to notice something here because the emotional experience was almost identical, even though the circumstances were completely different. He'd spent decades being told that stopping work would lead to purposelessness, boredom, maybe even depression. Everyone around him said he'd miss the structure, the colleagues, the routine. And what he actually felt when he left was relief so profound it caught him completely off guard. The Sunday night anxiety that had been his constant companion for years just vanished. The fatigue that he'd assumed was just what getting older felt like, that turned out not to be aging at all. That was chronic survival mode. That was what happens to a human nervous system when it's under sustained low-level stress for so long that the stress becomes invisible, becomes the new normal. He described it as feeling like he'd been walking around with a low-grade fever for years without knowing it. And once he stopped, the fever broke. His body finally felt safe enough to begin healing. And here's something important about that. When you're inside the machine normalizes exhaustion. It tells you that being permanently tired is just adulthood, that the Sunday dread is just part of being responsible, that needing a drink to relax is just how grown-ups decompress. But that's not adulthood. That's chronic stress being mistaken for normal life. And the only way most people discover this is when they finally stop and realize they didn't miss what they thought they'd miss. At all. What they lost wasn't purpose. What they lost was the pressure. And losing the pressure wasn't a tragedy. It was a liberation. Now, I'm not here to tell you to quit your job tomorrow. That's not the point. The point is to understand what you're actually dealing with, what the system is actually designed to do, and what your real options look like. Because the financial side of this conversation is just as important as the emotional side. Here's the fundamental truth about money that school never taught you. And this goes back to something genuinely important that gets buried under all the noise about crypto and stocks and get-rich schemes. Most people's financial lives are built entirely around defense, meaning managing what goes out, budgeting, cutting subscriptions, saving a percentage of their paycheck. And look, that stuff matters. A simple framework like allocating 50% of your income to essentials, 30% to personal spending, and 20% directly to savings is genuinely useful. It keeps you in the game. But here's the paradox. Defense alone doesn't set you free. You can cut your spending to almost nothing, and the best you'll achieve is being comfortably not broke. Nobody builds lasting financial freedom by skipping their morning coffee. Real wealth comes from the offense side of the equation, from production, from creating value and capturing part of it, from understanding the difference between working for money and having money work for you. The author Robert Kiyosaki laid this out in a concept called the cash flow quadrant. There are 4 ways people earn income: as an employee, as a self-employed person, as a business owner, or as an investor. In the first 2, you're exchanging your time for money. In the second 2, systems and assets generate income for you. That's not just a wealth-building strategy. It's the only genuine exit from the cycle. And schools were never designed to teach you this, because if everyone understood it, if everyone knew how to build income streams that didn't require trading all their hours away, the whole system would look very different. Schools were built to produce reliable, disciplined workers. And that's not a conspiracy theory. That's just an honest assessment of what the curriculum actually prepares you for. The wealthiest people in the world don't just earn differently, they think about money differently. They understand compounding, which is the idea that your money earns returns, and those returns earn returns, and over time, the effect becomes exponential. They understand leverage, which means using systems, technology, capital, and other people's skills to multiply the output of their own efforts. They understand ownership, which is the key distinction between someone who works for a business and someone who owns a piece of one. And they understand that having multiple streams of income isn't just something rich people do. It's what makes people financially free in the first place. But here's what ties all of this together. And this is the real lesson from everyone who has actually escaped the grind and been honest about what they found on the other side. It was never really about money. Or rather, money was just the symptom. The deeper issue was identity. When your work becomes who you are, the thought of changing your life feels like losing yourself entirely. When your lifestyle requires a certain income level, you become a prisoner of your own spending. When you believe that security means the next paycheck, you will always feel unsafe, no matter how much you earn. The real escape isn't just a financial transaction. It's a fundamental shift in how you understand your own worth, your own time, and what a genuinely good life actually requires. Both people we talked about today discovered the same thing independently. Once you stop chasing more, what you already have starts to feel like enough. Not because you've given up or settled, but because you finally stopped letting the machine define your value. One of them figured out his actual minimum viable income, the baseline amount he genuinely needed to live well, and it was far lower than he'd assumed. The other realized that freedom isn't expensive, lavish, or impressive looking. It's quiet mornings, unscheduled afternoons, and going to bed feeling at peace. And I know what some of you are thinking right now. This sounds great, but I have bills, a family, responsibilities. I can't just walk away. And that's completely valid. Nobody is suggesting you turn your life upside down tomorrow without a plan. What we are suggesting is that you stop accepting the daily grind as inevitable. Stop treating exhaustion as normal. Stop waiting for some distant retirement date to start asking what your life is actually for. Because here is the uncomfortable truth that cuts through everything else. You have a finite number of years, a finite number of Monday mornings, a finite number of summers, and every single one you spend dreading the next day is one you don't get back. The cycle doesn't end by working harder. It ends by changing the game entirely. And that starts not with a dramatic resignation letter, but with a simple, honest question. Is this actually the life I want? If the answer makes you uncomfortable, that discomfort is worth paying attention to. Because on the other side of it, there are people who feel healthier, freer, more alive, and more themselves than they have in decades. And every single one of them wishes they'd started asking that question sooner.